All right, so this is day 2 of Paul Revere's ride. So we stopped here at this last stanza on the first page. We talked about how it says, "Beneath in the churchyard lay the dead in their night encampment on the hill, wrapped in silence so deep and still that he could hear like a sentinel's tread the watchful night wind as it went creeping along from the tent to tent, and seeming to whisper, all is well. A moment only he feels the spell of the place and the hour and the secret dread of the lonely belfry and the dead. For suddenly all his thoughts are bent on a shadowy something far away, where the river widens to meet the bay, a line of black that bends and floats on the rising tide like a bridge of boats." So we talked about how there's a metaphor between the graves that are lined up in the cemetery and then the encampment where all the military tents are set up. We also talked about how in that stanza, night wind, creeping, whisper was a form of personification. Now Mrs. Toll's trying to find her place, so give me just a second. And school is letting out right now, so you're hearing lots of noise in the background. Sorry about that. So here at the bottom of this stanza, what do we know about the British? What are they doing right now? They're going by boat. So the British are going by boat. So what do you think Paul Revere is going to see in the Old North Church? All right, next stanza. "Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride." So who's being impatient to mount and ride? Paul Revere. "Booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere." So remember, he's on the opposite shore looking back towards the Old North Church. "Now he patted his horse's side, now gazed on the landscape far and near, then impetuous stamped the earth, and turned and tightened his saddle girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the Old North Church, as it rose above the graves on the hill." And remember that there's that graveyard there right by the Old North Church. "Lonely and spectral and somber and still, and lo, as he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer and then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes till full on his sight a second lamp, and the belfry burns." So what is he seeing? He's seeing 2 lights, which notifies him that who is coming? The British are coming, and they're coming by sea, because there's 2 lights. So we know from the stanza that Revere is on the shore opposite the church. To better see the signal and to get a head start on the soldiers. So remember, his job was to look for the lights so that he could notify all the people of how the British were coming, if they were coming by land or sea. And now we know that they were coming by sea. And his job was to wake everybody up. And we called them Minutemen because they had to be ready to fight within 1 minute. So they were dressed and in bed, they had their guns ready to go, and in 60 seconds they could be ready to fight. Another thing I want to point out is this word impetuous. Impetuous means quickly, carelessly. We know that Revere feels impatient, nervous, and he is ready to go. Can you imagine how he must be feeling? Because it's all on him to notify these people. Of course, we know there were other writers that were helping, but this poem is specifically about him. Impatient and nervous, and ready to go. A little further down, I want you to underline the word spectral and somber. So this gives us kind of a ghost-like feeling, very serious. Thinking about the graves on the hill, they're lonely and spectral and somber and still. Again, look, we've got SSS, a little bit of an alliteration going on there. And then this part right here, a glimmer and then a gleam of light. We've got a form of connotation. This right here gives a sense of hope and optimism. Seeing a glimmer and then a gleam of light. You can imagine he's sitting there and he's waiting and he's just, he's impatient and he's nervous and he's ready to go and he's got his saddle on his horse and he's just watching that bell tower. And when he finally sees that glimmer and that gleam of light, it's hope, it's optimism. It's his turn now to get on his horse and ride. And then, of course, at the bottom it tells us that a second lamp was seen. So he sees two lanterns, two glimmers of light. And this tells him to let everybody know that the British, are coming by sea. All right, let's move to the next stanza. A hurry of hoofs in a village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles in passing a spark, struck out by a steed that flies fearless and fleet. That was all. And yet, though the gloom and the light, the fate of a nation was riding that night, and the spark struck out by that steed in his flight kindled the land into flame with its heat. So I want us to underline the fate of a nation was riding that night. Very powerful line. We've got a form of personification here. Sorry, you're hearing my phone. And then let's underline spark struck. And I want you to notice the word flame. So here's a bit of a metaphor. Got the spark, that light. So imagine the horse's hooves scraping on the bricked road. And they're sparking. So the spark that's light. The spark that lights. And the word flame, it's showing us that there's a fire. So this is like the fire is the revolution. So we've got the American Revolution. You'll be talking a lot about the American Revolution in your U.S. history classes in a couple of weeks. So you have a little bit of a head start. He has left the village and mounted the steep, and beneath him tranquil and broad and deep is the mystic meeting the ocean tides, and under the alders that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the ledge, is heard the tramp of the steed as he rides. So we hear, we know that he has left the village. He's we've got this mystic, this kind of deeply spiritual image here. We've got a little bit of alliteration: loud, ledge, soft, sand. And there's also some denotation here with the contrast of the sound of soft and loud. We've got a denotation there mixed in with that alliteration. It was 12 by the village clock, so what time is it? It's midnight. When he crossed the bridge into Medford town, so now he's in Medford town, our setting has changed. He heard the crowing of the cock. What does that mean? Hear the rooster. And the barking of the farmer's dog, and felt the damp of the river fog. So notice all these senses. We're hearing what he hears. The crowing of the cock, the farmer's dog, and he's feeling the damp of the river fog that rises when the sun goes down. Now we move on to another time. It was 1, so now we know it's 1 a.m. by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. So now where is he at? Right, he's gone from Medford town to Lexington. And after we finish the poem, I have a map that will be on canvas that you can actually see the exact route that he took. It's kind of neat to see. He saw the gilded weathercock. What's a weathercock? This is like the weather vane. Gilded is like gold. Swim in the moonlight as he passed. And the meeting house windows, blank and bare, gaze at him with a spectral glare. So we've got another form that the windows are actually gazing at him. We've got personification. As if they already stood aghast at the bloody work they would look upon. So what is this an example of? Foreshadowing. This is foreshadowing the war, the Revolutionary War, the American Revolution. I can't talk today. You know what I'm trying to say. American Revolution. All right, our time changes again. It was 2 by the village clock, so what time is it now? 2 a.m. When he came to the bridge in, where is he at? Concord town. He heard the bleating of the flock and the twitter of the birds among the trees, and felt the breath of the morning breeze blowing over the meadows brown. And one was safe and asleep in his bed. And so they're talking about a specific person here. There's this one man that was safe and asleep in his bed. All right, let's move over to our last page. Who at the bridge would be first to fall. So that means this one man that's safe and asleep in his bed is going to be the first one of the first people that are going to be killed in the fight. So this is a form of foreshadowing here. So the man sleeping will be one of the first killed in the fight. Who that day would be lying dead, pierced by a British musket ball. So how is he going to be killed? With a British musket ball, with the British guns. You know the rest in the books you have read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball. From behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again. Under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. So let me tell you a little bit about the British Army. The British Army, they fought in rows. So they would stand in rows and they would fight. And they also they were called redcoats because their coats were red. So they had red coats, but they had this white sash that went right across their heart. And that white sash made them an easy target, because the Minutemen could see that white and they knew, hey, I'm just going to shoot right there. And they could fire to the white sash and kill the Redcoats. And the thing about the Minutemen, they didn't fight in rows. They fought behind trees and they fought behind fences. They would hide. They kind of were like the Scottish a bit, where they hide and they attack their enemy that way. All right, last stanza. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm. To every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. So here we have a cry of defiance and not of fear. So the Minutemen, they were willing to die for their freedom. They did not want to return back to the British rule. And so what's our tone here? It's patriotic. And then I want to point out the very, very last two words, Paul Revere. This singles out that Revere was the only messenger and only hero of this event. Longfellow was honoring him, but we know, and you guys will read about it here in a little bit, that there were other writers that were helping along with this. So this poem was dedicated to honor Revere. And what do you think Longfellow's purpose was? To teach us history and to honor our heroes. Oops, there we go. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed Paul Revere, and I hope you guys look forward to reading the Star Spangled Banner for the and Oh Captain, My Captain.